afternoon. That is exactly what happened. The G8 became the G7 again. Russia is out. The planned June G8 summit in Sochi in Russia, where they just had the Olympics, is now going to be the June G7 summit in Brussels. Russia just lost it, and Russia is not invited to the other meeting. Today's statement expelling Russia from the G8, which is called the Hague Declaration, it says, quote, "We, the leaders of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States, reaffirm our support for Ukraine's sovereignty. We strongly condemn Russia's illegal attempt to annex Crimea. We remain ready to intensify actions, including coordinated sectoral sanctions that will have an increasingly significant impact on the Russian economy. We will not participate in the planned Sochi summit." And then this is interesting. Crucially, we have decided that G7, right, remember it's not the G8 anymore, G7 energy ministers will also meet now to discuss ways to strengthen our collective energy security. Well, Russia's foreign minister responded to that statement today, to Russia being kicked out of the G8, by basically refusing to leave any club that would not have his country. He rejected the notion of Russia being expelled from the G8. He said because the G8 is an informal group, really nobody can be expelled from it. In other words, Russia's decided that this didn't really happen. We were never really part of it anyway. It doesn't even really exist. Despite their effort, though, to laugh this all off, it is clear that sanctions focused on punishing the Russian economy and a concerted push to rid G8 countries and European countries of their dependence on Russian oil, these are serious and potentially scary threats from Russia's perspective. I mean, as much as this conflict is about anything, it is about energy. Russia's the #2 net exporter of oil in the world, second only to Saudi Arabia. And a big chunk of those exports go to Europe, to Germany, to the Netherlands, to Italy. Germany in particular gets more than 1/3 of their oil and natural gas from Russia. But even despite that dependence on Russian oil, the head of the German government now says she supports an escalation of sanctions against the country that provides her country with 1/3 of its energy supply. Meanwhile, in the disputed territory of Crimea, the Ukrainian government seems to also be fighting its fight using energy. It's reporting today that the Ukrainian government has cut off the electricity supply to Crimea. Crimea is not connected by land to Russia. It only connects to mainland Ukraine by a tiny spit of land, and across that tiny spit of land is how they get a lot of their water and most of their electricity. They have been experiencing widespread power outages today. An escalation of this conflict that involves countries cutting off other countries from oil and gas, that would be a big deal. That would have big economic consequences, not just in their immediate effect, but in terms of their knock-on effect. But it is an eventuality that European leaders seem to be preparing for. Also, if Vladimir Putin decides to invade another sovereign country, decides to invade more of Ukraine, he has said he does not intend to, but he said quite a few things in recent days that haven't ended up being true. Or even if he refuses to unoccupy the one he has already invaded, are the United States and other world leaders willing to do anything further in terms of continuing to put pressure on Russia's economy? Would there be an effort to sanction Russian oil and gas companies? Will there be an international effort to stop Russian oil and gas companies from being able to sell their wares around the world? So far, President Obama has announced targeted sanctions and travel bans against 27 Russian individuals and 1 Russian bank. As president, he can take unilateral action that way. He can issue sanctions. He can punish Russia without the help of Congress. But in order to spend money on this conflict, in order to aid, for example, the fledgling Ukrainian government, to show America's support for Ukraine financially, President Obama can't do that side of it on his own. For that, he needs Congress. And tonight, Congress did act. The U.S. Senate voted overwhelmingly tonight to begin that process, to advance a $1 billion package of aid to Ukraine. So what happens next here? What is the next step in this conflict economically? What is the president willing to do, and how far is Congress willing to go in order to help him? Joining us now is Ryan Grim. He's Washington Bureau Chief of the Huffington Post. Mr. Grim, thank you very much for being here. It's nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
I know you were on Capitol Hill today when the Senate voted on advancing that bill about Ukraine. What struck you as significant about the vote or about the way it went down today?
Well, the Republicans who voted to move forward pretty universally did not express their support for voting on final passage of the bill. So in other words, it looks like an overwhelming victory, but that doesn't mean in a couple days when it comes up that it's going to cruise through. They're quite opposed to a provision that the White House wants in there that would allow reforms at the IMF. Basically, it would allow the $63 billion pool of money to be moved from an emergency kind of crisis fund into the general fund. We agreed to do this 4 years ago, but we've never implemented it because we agree to do things all the time that we don't implement because we have this thing called the United States Senate. And so they're saying that this is not the right time to do it. Now, there has never been a right time to do it over the past 4 years. The argument is that the IMF, in order to be effective in Ukraine and for our $1 billion to be effective in Ukraine, needs this flexibility to have access to this $63 billion. But the Tea Party hates anything that smacks of foreigners, and so it is deemed to be dead on arrival over on the House side. So the entire thing is getting caught up over this IMF reform provision. So
we're seeing, I mean, increasingly, I don't want to call it necessarily belligerent, but at least increasingly sharply worded criticisms, not just of Russia, but of the West and the United States' inability to push Vladimir Putin around. Conservative critique of what's happening right now with Russia is that the United States isn't doing enough. But you're saying that the reason that we might not be able to do anything through Congress is because of objections to an accounting change with the IMF rules?
That's right, and it gets even more bizarre than that. A lot of the Republicans are saying, okay, look, we will cave on this IMF thing if you give us a provision on the IRS that says the IRS has to back off its investigation of dark money groups. In other words, this is an international situation that we have going on. Russian troops are literally marching around in places the United States and Europe don't want them marching around. Congress is hung up over stopping the IRS from enforcing the law on these dark money groups. Because the law says these 501c4s cannot spend this amount of money on political activity, and Republicans are worried that the IRS is going to enforce the law. So in the Senate, at least so far, the objection is no, an arcane accounting change at the International Monetary Fund is enough to stop us from doing anything about what we keep calling World War III and comparing to Hitler. Or, take your choice, the other option is that unless you leave the Koch brothers and Karl Rove alone, we will not do anything about something we're calling World War III and akin to Hitler. It's quite a remarkable state of affairs. I mean,
I almost can't believe that this is real. I mean, this is part of the reason I wanted to talk to you, because I know you saw it happen, but I can't actually believe this is what's going on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and most people don't. Most of the Republicans don't want to say out loud that this is the situation. Now, we talked to Ted Cruz, and he said, absolutely, this is a terrible thing that if you allowed the this IMF provision to go through. He even went so far as to say that it would strengthen Russia's hand within the IMF. And Ted Cruz is a smart person. He knows that Russia has basically zero control over what the IMF is going to do with Ukraine. But that's the kind of thing he'll say, and I bet that's the kind of thing that you would see get picked up by Tea Party groups, and they'll start emailing it around to each other saying, look, Obama is trying to surrender the IMF to Russia. We can't allow this to happen. And so this is the situation we're in. And so what the House Republicans say to the Senate is, yeah, okay, maybe it's crazy, but the only way we can get this IMF thing through is if you give us this IRS thing too. Hey, sorry, that's just the way it works. We've got a crazy caucus to deal with. This is how we're going to have to get it through. It's just bananas.
Wow. So if you want to know how the United States can respond to this situation, we can do things that the president can do. But anything positive that needs to be done that has any dollars attached to it to try to help Ukraine or any of the rest of it, it goes into the comment section at blog posts on WorldNet Daily about black helicopters, and there it dies. Amazing stuff. Ryan Grim, Huffington Post Washington Bureau Chief, thank you very much for your time tonight, Ryan.
Thank you.